Hey, so glad to see you today on Daily Hope. We've been talking about Paul the Apostle and his physical affliction called his thorn in the flesh. It's found here in 2 Corinthians 12. Now, little background on Paul. Paul worked as a tent maker. So as he went around planting churches and helping churches, he had a vocation. And if the church he was at didn't have enough resources to feed him or give him a place to stay, well, then he would make these tents and sell them in the marketplace there and use that income to rent a hotel room, buy food, etc., being a tent maker. I thought about Paul a lot. I've written an entire book on this little passage about his thorn in the flesh called I Am Strong. And as I was praying through this, there was a visual that came to my mind. When you think of a tent serves a purpose. You sleep in there, and it protects you from the elements, all the elements. If it's raining, the water beads up on the tent and flows down the sides, so when you wake up in the morning, you're not soaking wet. Even if it's not raining, dew falls overnight in most places, and so you wake up and you're wet if you're outside. But if you're in your tent, you're not. If the sun is shining and it's just you need shade, you can go into a tent with thick enough fabric and it will shade you. A tent shields and shades. Now God says here to Paul, when Paul asks God to take away his weakness, God says, "My grace is sufficient for you. My power works best in weakness," or "my power is made perfect in weakness." I was praying over this one day and actually had the visual in my mind. I'm not saying this was from God. This was just my brain putting all this together, or maybe it was from God, I don't know. But I had this visual of a tent, a sturdy tent, and then a knife or something slashes a slash through the fabric. And now when it rains, the water flows in there. So if you're in the tent, this is like a wound and it hurts. We don't like a wound in our tent. In fact, earlier in 2 Corinthians, our bodies were likened to tents. But here's the visual I had. God's blessing, and specifically his power, is like rain that is constantly falling onto the life of a believer. But our pride, remember, Paul said, God allowed this thorn in the flesh so that I wouldn't be proud. Our pride is like a tent barrier between us and God's power. When there's pride in our lives, God's power beads up and rolls off the side, just like rain rolling off of a tent. How do we know this? Well, both James and Peter said God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under his mighty hand, that in due time he might lift you up. So if pride is active in my life, God could be raining down his power to empower me to do great things, and it'll just beat up and fall off my life. I won't experience it. When a thorn in the flesh, a pain or a difficulty cuts through the fabric of my pride, my self-dependence, now God's power is able to flow through that opening into my life. And so while Satan was the author of Paul's thorn in the flesh, Paul made it clear 2 times, God allowed this so I wouldn't become proud. And then God tells him, my grace is going to carry you through. And Paul, good news. You feel weak? Well, my power invades your life through the opening of your weakness. These are deep things, but I want to encourage you today, where there's weakness in your life and you've prayed and it hasn't gone away, today, view it as an opening, a gap in your pride and self-dependency through which the power of God can flow into your life. I'll tell you more about this tomorrow. There's lots I could say about this, so I'll see you tomorrow for more Daily Hope.